Hey, welcome to Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm your host, Bruce Waller, where I get to talk to leaders that are making a difference in the workplace and in our community. What did they do to get started, and what are they doing to stay there? And man, can you believe it? We are in season 3, kicking off 2022 with another special guest, and his name is Jason Suto. He is the vice president of talent. He's a talent mobility partner at BlackRock, and he's also certified by Worldwide ERC with the CRP and his GMS. And I am so excited to have you on the show. Hey, Jason, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Bruce. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I always start the show off reflecting, where I met my guests or maybe where I learned about them. And for you, I actually met you several years ago. We worked together as with your previous organization. And I remember taking a trip up to Delaware. It was like one of the most funnest times I had. Do you remember that?
I absolutely do. You came to our humble little small office in Newcastle, Delaware, and we were always excited to have people come visit us there. So yeah, we appreciate you taking the time, and we've been acquaintances for years now, and it's great to reconnect with you in this capacity. So
yeah. It. Yeah, for sure. We actually reconnected recently in the Q4 of 2021 at the Worldwide ERC Global Workforce Symposium. I remember seeing you, and it was like one of the first live events for ERC, and everybody was just like fist bumping and just so excited, so much energy. And I remember thinking, man, it's so good to see you. Hey, what did you, just real quick, what did you think about the conference?
I loved it. It was my first ERC conference. So for me, everything about it was fantastic. It was great to connect with new people in the industry. It was great to see old friends. It was great to be in person, in a city that I haven't been to since 1997. So I thought it was fantastic.
Wow, I didn't realize that. You've been in relocation for many, many, many years, and the first time you've been to the national conference, that's got to be exciting. And yes, to see different people. I had Andrew Walker on in season 2, and we talked a little bit about the conference, and he kind of said the same thing. It was just so good just to reconnect with everyone and share, what's been going on, not just in mobility, but just in our lives. And so you work for BlackRock. Would you mind just sharing just a brief highlight, like who is BlackRock and how do you serve your customers?
Sure, absolutely. So BlackRock is the world's largest asset management company. And I work out of an HR hub here in Wilmington, Delaware, working on the global mobility team. So all of the kind of proactive things that have to happen before relocation is decided falls on my plate, and it's my responsibility to liaise with internal HR stakeholders and business stakeholders to see if mobility is the right fit for different instances, and then we're responsible for taking it on from there.
Man, what a gift for BlackRock to have you in that role, because you've really spent time now on both sides. You were spent many, many years on the service provider side, and today on the corporate side. I'm just curious, as you shared that, I'm curious, what's been the biggest difference or the biggest eye opener for you?
The biggest eye opener for me has just been coming over to the corporate side, because I already brought with me, all of the knowledge of what's involved with a relocation, but I really didn't have that experience on what happens from the corporate side. So for me, not that it was a huge adjustment, but I spent a lot of time getting to know the culture here at BlackRock. What is our strategic vision when it comes to mobility and talent acquisition and employee retention? So yeah, it was getting to know the different internal stakeholders here at BlackRock and probing them for their feedback on what they would like to see out of our program and how to evolve it and make it better from there. So it wasn't challenging, but it definitely was a mind shift from what I did for the past 21 years, and exciting nonetheless. And I think what I've brought to the table here at BlackRock as being that man who can show them what happens behind the curtain of relocation, and educating them internally to make us a little bit more savvy internally when it comes to our relocation program and purchasing and things like that.
I love that. That reminds me of the Wizard of Oz. Pay no attention to the
Exactly.
man behind the curtain,
Exactly.
because we know there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes when it comes to mobility from all different service providers and sectors of it. And so, man, what a gift for them to have you in that role and for you to be able to. And I love that how you started off. You said, I'm basically started assessing really and just observing what's going on and trying to understand the culture and the mission and the objectives. And I talked to HR or leaders in general about, it doesn't matter if you serve in HR or mobility or finance, what area it is, you're a leader of the organization. The key is how can we drive the vision and the mission forward, right?
Right, exactly. And I think that was one of my biggest fears making the crossover from a service provider to a corporate role, was that, especially after a 21-year career, was, am I going to fit in? So I knew that I could do the job and I had the expertise and knowledge when it comes to mobility, but my biggest fear was, am I going to be a good fit? So that's why I spent a lot of time upon when I first started. I've been here 2 years already. That time has just flown by. When I first started, just talking to people and getting to know who does what, and the different business lines that we have, and just how everyone feels about the organization, and then becoming a cheerleader for the organization myself, which is fairly easy for me to do anyway.
I'm glad you shared that because I know there's probably some listeners right now that are new to the organization and they're trying to figure out how do I fit in? How do I fit into this organization? And what you just shared, you started with engagement, just going around talking to people, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it even started before I actually started the job. In the whole, job hunt process, you really have to focus in and hone in on what an organization's mission, values, and goals are. Because if they don't align with your personal vision and goals, it's probably not going to be a good fit. So fortunately for me, BlackRock is everything that I stand for as well. So I knew from the beginning that it felt good. It felt like the right fit. So it was just a matter of then making my authentic self shine through and showing that I was the right person for this role.
In my new book, Life in the Leadership Lane, I talk about whenever the company's values are the same as your personal values, life is just better in your career. And so you just reinforce that. And I appreciate that. And I know, like I said, there's people listening right now. They're just trying to figure out how do they do that. And I love what you shared that. Hey, let me ask you, I want to kind of kick this thing off with the Jason Suto story. Like, I want to learn a
Sure.
little bit more about you. I mean, I've known you as an acquaintance for a few years, but I would love to know, like, where did you grow up and how in the world did you get into mobility and leadership?
So I grew up outside of Philadelphia and within Delaware, from being a small child outside Philadelphia, and then eventually we moved to Delaware, and I was brought up in Wilmington. It all started with my stepfather and mother really instilled in me a great, not just work ethic, but just strong ethics to begin with. So all during school, I was a not a great student, but I was a very good student. I was involved in all kinds of activities. So, I would say starting in high school, that's where I started to come out of my shell as far as obtaining skills like public speaking and things like that. And then into college, that flowed. During university, I did go to school. I was going to be a school teacher.
Mm-mm.
Um, and that's what I got my degree in. And then once I graduated and then I was attempting to get a full-time teaching role, I kind of decided that maybe that wasn't the best track for me. But at heart, I feel as though I'm still an educator. And then all of my other roles that I had in jobs since high school were always service oriented. And I excelled at them. I excelled at meeting people's expectations. I excelled at delivering a service that they wanted to give great feedback about. So it's interesting that when the role at the RMC came along, it's kind of, I took little pieces of all my experiences. I took the service portion of it. I took the educator service of it, the educator portion of it, and kind of rolled it all up into one. And at the RMC, that's how I really thrived there, was in the role, the service role that I was in there, because I was a counselor, I was an educator, I was a service person, and it worked. And I fell into that role simply by chance. I was unhappy with a role that I was in because I was passed up for a supervisory position, sent out 10 resumes, and was a move coordinator 2 weeks later. So go figure.
Oh my goodness, that's how it happens. I love what you just shared though. You talked about, and by the way, my wife is a school teacher, but I love how you talked about the service piece of it and education, and how you continue to be focused in service, but educating and being a counselor, because you do that. It doesn't really matter what role you're in. That's just a great mindset, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of people fall short in their visions of what they want to do in their career. They think that in order to do a specific role, you need to have a certain education, or a certain mastery of something. And they forget that in order to do a function properly, you need to take all your strengths that you're good at and then find a way to make those work to your advantage, and find your lane, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how I feel that I did it, and it's been successful for me.
I love that, man. Listen, if you're listening right now, just stop, get your pen out, start taking some notes. There is some gold here. I love that. Hey, let me ask you, speaking of find your lane, you talked about, hey, I'm going to be a school teacher, and then you shifted, and then next thing you know, you're a move coordinator, and then here you are today, leading in a huge organization, leading mobility. And I just want to ask you, like, was there a moment when you said, you know what, I love what I do. I've been able to align or integrate this education counselor. So I've been able to do all that in this role, and that's given me joy. Was there a time when you found your lane?
Um, that's a great question. Yeah, I think obviously I found it with my last employer, because obviously I was in that role for 21 years. I wasn't a move coordinator for 21 years. Obviously, I advanced within that position and worked my way up to a vice president of client services within the organization. I broke out of just knowing household goods only, and then learned the full scope of both domestic and global relocations and what's involved with them. I think the biggest challenge that I had when, unfortunately, my position was eliminated with the RMC due to acquisition,
Okay.
that I was heartbroken. That my biggest fear was, this is so embedded in my DNA,
Hmm.
and my biggest fear was to not be able to find something where I could continue to love what I do,
Hmm.
and stay in that space. The thought of changing lanes, for lack of
Uh-huh.
better words,
Right.
was frightening. But it's amazing how persistence and focus, and time, will make things work to your advantage.
That's fantastic. I love, what I love most about what you just said is you said, to continue to love what I do. You didn't say to continue to make the money I was making, or to continue the hours I was, working. It was to
Mhm.
continue to love what I do.
Yeah.
I just absolutely love it. Let me ask you this. Have there been, like, I mean, obviously you are a high performer, top level leader. Have you had mentors that have helped you get there along your career? And if you have, I'm just curious, like, what was it that made him such a great mentor? And you even give him a shout out if you want.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, all through my life, I have had great mentors, starting with my parents, of course,
Mm,
who instilled in me a great foundation to get up and be ready for the day every day and go out, to work, and be a good upstanding citizen. Having teachers throughout school that really showed me the way and put me on the right path. I've had best friends from college that I'm still, very close to, that, I know if I picked up the phone and I needed assistance, that they would be right there for me. And then in my career, it's all about establishing relationships.
mm,
And what I've learned as far as relationships are concerned, the ones that are most valuable to a person are the ones where there's give and take, right?
mm,
You can't just be a taker, and you can't just be a giver. So the mentors that I have been past managers. Actually, I'll give a shout out to Darlene Hassel, who was the original HR leader of the RMC, in which I was employed for. She
mhm.
hired me, and as a 25-year-old who was told that, someone was flying down from Toronto just to interview me, it made me feel special. And Darlene and I have always had, to this day, even though she's retired now and is an artist at heart and totally doing something different, I still have a connection with her because I look up to her, especially for the fact that she had faith in me. And that's
Mm.
something that I carry with me to this day, that don't ever forget about the people who took a bet on you and had faith in you. They're the ones you want to stick to.
Oh man. Oh, that's so good. That's so good. I love that. I love that. Hey, let me ask you this. Do you find yourself, I mean, you just mentioned that you're an educator, counselor. Do you find yourself now mentoring people in your current organization or?
Absolutely. And I think it's part of me being that educator at
Yeah.
heart. I
Yeah.
never miss an opportunity to share my knowledge with someone.
Mm,
I constantly feel that every day is an opportunity to learn something new, and to share that knowledge. For me, it's never been about, trying to hoard all that knowledge for me to get ahead and to keep others down. For me, it's always been sharing the knowledge and let's all raise us up
mm.
together. So yeah, absolutely. I feel like no one's ever like said you've been a great mentor or, actually come out and said it, but I feel as though there has had to have been. She's right next to me, sitting next to me, pointing, going. So yeah, absolutely. There's people out there who I'm sure would think I'm a mentor.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's so many authors that have been mentors to me. They'll never know it. Reading their books and implementing their ideas and partners that I've worked with. I remember working with you, and I remember that you listen when you just said the give and take. I immediately thought about our partnership. It's give and take. It's like, hey, let's help each other win. And that's really what it takes. So I love that. Hey, let's talk leadership. Here we are,
Sure.
2022. Oh my gosh. One of the questions I always like to ask on the show is, if someone were to say, hey, Jason, how would you like define leadership? How would you respond to that?
Oh, that's such a great question. Leadership to me is taking responsibility, taking responsibility when things go wrong and admitting to your own mistakes.
Mm,
Leadership to me is when others make mistakes, not to call them out on the carpet about it or berate them about it. It's rolling up your sleeves and helping them solve the problem. And then after you're able to get through that crisis, to sit back and work with them to say, how can we close this gap and
mm,
find a solution to not have the same circumstance happen again. Leadership is recognizing people's talents
mhm,
and assigning roles and responsibilities to them that are going to make them shine based on those talents. Leadership is giving people opportunities, even though they may not ask for it. Yeah, I can go on and on.
I love that. You're right. And there's so many different ways to lead. And I love everything that you share. I'm curious, obviously, it's been a tough, 2020 and 2021 were heavy times. I'm curious if you've like shifted your leadership at all, or have you found any silver linings and now you lead a different way?
Oh, that's a great question too. I wouldn't say that I personally have changed my leadership styles anymore, but what I love about BlackRock as an organization is I really think they stepped up when this crisis came on and empowered the employees to say, you know what, we trust you
Mhm.
to do your jobs and work from home. And we actually thrived as an organization during the pandemic. So yeah, I think it's about just being trusted to do what you're supposed to do. You know, we're all adults. You know, we all know what our role and responsibilities are. But as a leader, you sometimes need to let go of um, that tether that you have
Mm,
over your team, and
mm.
just trust that they're going to do what they're supposed to do.
Oh my goodness. I get chills when you use that word trust. Hey, I want to ask you this, and I'm sitting here thinking we talked about you were at a service provider for 20 plus years, and here you are on the corporate side and for the last couple of years. What I want to ask you this: how do you, or how did you, or how would you recommend to someone else that might be listening today? How'd you create influence in the organization? Because we know that's not easy to do. I mean, one of the things, we talked about, what you mentioned earlier, was relationship building. How do you, or how does someone go about creating influence in the organization, especially when they're new?
Sure. You have to look for opportunities to interject your opinion and your expertise. I think as someone new to an organization, you have to be very careful in coming in kind of like a bull in a china shop, right? And
Mm,
saying, you know, I've done this for 21 years and I think we should, you know, you have to take time to assess your environment and
mhm,
get to know who the stakeholders are that you're working with. And then from there, find opportunities to interject your suggestions or different things you can implement to see change. I think you're going to be unsuccessful if you try to um, set ablaze whatever current processes are in place
mhm,
and start fresh. Change takes time. It takes
mhm,
patience. And it takes a lot of talking and conversations about what others' visions are and what your visions are.
mhm.
And you have to remember that just because you're the leader of a specific group or organization, that things, they shouldn't just be your vision. You need to solicit that input from everyone and come up with a collective vision for it to really be successful. Because anyone working under a vision that is dictated, they're going to be unhappy doing that because that's someone else's dream or goal. That's not theirs. They had no say, or, they don't feel a piece of them is interjected into that at all. So
Man, that
did
is
I
so
answer your
good.
question?
Oh
I
my
felt like I was kind
goodness.
of all over the
That
map with that.
is so good. I love that. It's all about collaborating and bringing others with you on that journey. And I
Yeah.
love how you talked about change takes time. So, don't come in like just be patient. Hey, let me ask you this. Obviously you have a passion. I can just feel it. You've been in global mobility for a long, long time. Uh, what is it that you love about global mobility?
I love the people, absolutely. And when I say people, that includes everyone. I have loved from day one working with the different service providers that are in the industry. Some of them I still carry in my heart because they took the time. The first time I picked up the phone to call an intermodal company to pull a 40-foot container for me, and I didn't know exactly what questions to ask, or they took the time to kind of say, okay, this is what I need, and walk me through it. So, I love establishing relationships with service providers, and to me, it's all about um, creating those networks and those relationships, because you never know who you're going to need out there in a pinch or in a favor. Not just that, I handled over 3,000 global relocations myself during my career at the RMC. I loved personally getting to know the transferee and their families, and working with them and feeling as though I was making a difference in their relocation and taking some stress away from them, and getting them acclimated to their role. You know, the question that I get asked the most when people find out what I do is, "Oh, you must travel all over the place." And I say, no, I actually travel vicariously through all the people, you know, that get to move around the world. So yeah, and then it's what's the people within my own organization. You know, I don't look at work as just people that I'm not affiliated with, or we just, you know, go to the same building. I have always looked at my work colleagues as family, as extension of you know, people in my life who matter. So yeah, it's about them too.
I love that. You know, I remember I worked on the operations side for the first 8 years of my career in mobility. And I remember going over to the sales and marketing side, and I never really have felt like I had found my lane, my purpose. And I remember the very first time I got the opportunity to help a friend whose banker was moving his mom from assisted living. She needed to move a couple of boxes and a nightstand from Dallas to Houston. And I remember being full, like my heart was so full. And I was like, this is it. This is what I enjoy doing. And it was about helping people. And it's about what you just talked about. I mean, you help so many people, just that feeling of joy, being able to take the burden off of someone. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so much stress. We all know that, you know, when it comes to moving, there's just a lot of stress
Yeah.
and uncertainty. And you're able to do that,
Mhm.
right?
Absolutely. One of the things I feel is, if you're in global mobility, if you haven't cried at a service after a service failure at one point, you're not invested in it. The fact that you're crying means that you felt as though you personally let someone down, because you were so invested in their well-being and their safety and their expectations. So yeah, that's the way I feel.
That is so good. I've cried several times. That is so fantastic. I love that. Hey, let me ask you this. You mentioned that whenever you came over to the organization, one of the things you're able to bring is you're able to pull back the curtain. And I'm just curious, like, maybe just, I don't know, maybe give us an example of what's something that might be behind the curtain that you've been able to help the organization see in your position. Anything come to mind?
Yeah, I don't think that prior to my joining the team, that our organization had a lot of in-depth knowledge on how pricing is structured when it comes to an RMC, about what type of services can be provided as a value add. They didn't know what they didn't know. So yeah, that's those are a couple of things that, you know, conversations that I've had since I've been here, you know, trying to educate the senior leaders uh, on the mobility team.
So good. So good. Hey, let me ask you this. And we talked about, you know, here we're starting to see organizations starting to go back to the office. Many of them have, you know, obviously they've been in the office, but many have not returned back to the office. And I'm just curious, just from your perspective, do you think we will see an increase or decrease in mobilizing our workforce with the remote work now in play? Any thoughts around that?
You know what, Bruce? The remote work objective, in theory, I think is a great idea. And many organizations are embracing it
Yeah.
and offering it.
Yeah.
Me personally, I don't. I think it's trending. I don't think that's where we're actually headed. I think it's trending because it's the current need in the current climate.
Mm.
Once, hopefully, we pull 100% out of this climate that we're in, I foresee global mobility reopening back up, if not even busier than where we left off pre-pandemic. And the reason I say that is that organizations are only going to be sustainable if they have a culture and environment in which people thrive. And how hard will it be to have employees working for you, onboarded with you, that are 100% remote and never really get immersed in that company culture? So yeah, I not to say that I think it's going to go away at all, and I think a
Yeah.
lot of organizations are going to change their policies to incorporate some type of flexibility when it comes to remote work. But to say that the future of the industry is remote work and that global mobility is going to become a dinosaur, I don't think that's going to happen at all.
Yeah, that's so good. I appreciate you sharing that. Hey, for someone that is listening that, I don't know, maybe, maybe someone just said, hey, we want you to handle mobility now in the organization. Maybe they don't do a whole lot of relocations, but, they do some. And they're not quite sure how to like set that up. Any tips you would offer, like, I don't know, someone that is in their organization, they are responsible for mobility. It's not a huge program, maybe a smaller mid-sized program.
Yeah.
Any tips that you might share that might help them kind of not necessarily get started, but kind of shape that for their organization?
Yeah, absolutely. They really need to assess what is going to be the priorities for them in doing these relocations.
Okay.
They need to assess whether or not employee experience is going to be number one, pricing is going to be number one. If they want to say, we want to make sure that our employees feel taken care of and that we want to make a smooth experience for them. We want to make sure that the money that we're investing in them, that we see a return on investment because they are retained and we have retention after the assignment is over, after the relocation is over, continuing to have them work for the organization. Then they need to make sure they create a policy or align themselves with a provider who's going to create the best experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Pricing is what it is. If they're looking to find the most cost-effective costs and spend little on the program, you know that's absolutely doable. What is the sacrifice in return? It's the
Yeah.
employee experience.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think they need to get that question answered first and then go from there.
I love how you really drove that with, yes, price is obviously important to every organization, but what's the experience look like? And really driving that. And then you talked earlier about the importance of partnerships. I mean, having that partner that can help you and you help them with that educating and counseling is huge, isn't it?
Oh, it's absolutely. It's critical to
Yeah.
that's the core foundation of any partnership with any vendor. If you don't have a solid partnership as your foundation, then and let's just talk about partnership for a couple minutes as well.
Yeah.
On the RMC side, I had many relationships with corporate clients where we were looked at as a commodity. They didn't want to have a partnership. We were always at arm's length, and it was a very uncomfortable type of service delivery, I
Hmm.
felt. So yeah, if you want your program to excel and you want a provider who's going to look out for you when you're making decisions and giving their expertise, you want to create that partnership as the core foundation of that relationship and build upon that.
Yeah, no, that's so good. And you used the word earlier, trust. You have to really create that trust among that.
Exactly.
I love that. This is really fantastic. And I know there's somebody out there listening right now that's, they're moving some folks and they are just trying to figure out, what do I need to do here? So hopefully that helped. Hey, let me ask you this last question before we shift on is, well, I'm curious, like you're a driven person. Like what drives you, Jason? As a
What
leader.
drives me? Um, my family, my kids.
Oh,
um, I want to set a good example. I want to feel as though I'm making a difference, when I come to work every day. I want to, I never want to feel like I'm the smartest person in the room as a
Mm.
leader and be so arrogant that, I know everything and that, there's no room for me to kind of absorb from other people that I come in contact with. I myself am driven by the daily opportunities that are posed to me to face challenges that I've never had before and kind of, come up with creative solutions that I'm going to add that to my bank of expertise and knowledge bank to get to know people that I haven't met yet and in facets of the industry that I've, have not been in quite close contact with before. And then bringing all that home and then, when you go home at the end of the day, which I'm sure you do, and you ask their kids how their day was, when they ask you, well, how was your day? You get to share these experiences as well to kind of get them ready for what it's like to be an adult in an organization and kind of what happens, you know, throughout my day.
That's so good. I love that. I love that every day. Hey, let me ask you, I'm just curious, for you personally, are you an early riser or are you a late night person?
I'm an early riser.
Okay. What time do you
I
get up?
5 a.m.
Yeah. Yeah. You're part of the
Yeah,
5
5
a.m. club,
a.m.
of course, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Anything you do, I'm just curious, do you have like a practice or anything you do every day? Like every day you do this, it just helps you keep on track as a leader?
I really need time every day to go through. I need quiet time.
Yeah. Right.
I need at least a half an hour, and this is why I liked returning to office because the
Hmm.
commute kind of gives me that. I don't like I like listening to the radio in the car, but when I'm coming to work, I don't put it on because I like to just be alone with myself and my thoughts,
Mm.
getting ready for my day, and then the same on the return home. I like that quiet time to decompress, to think about what happened during the day, to think about things that maybe I need to put on, my slate for the following day or just keep in my mind. But I need that time every day just for me to collect and control and organize my thoughts.
Yeah, John Maxwell has a good book called Thinking for a Change and talks about the importance of thinking. And I find that a common thread for high performers in any role is that time to think. And I appreciate you sharing that. Hey, I want to ask you the last question before we go into it's time to accelerate. And here's the question. You've given some incredible advice today. But I always like to ask my guests, has there ever been some advice that you were given? Maybe it was from a family member, maybe it was a friend or a colleague. It was so good. You just find yourself sharing that with others often.
Oh, what immediately comes to mind is kind of it's always darkest before the dawn, I guess. We all get in these spaces at some points in our lives where we feel um, lost or confused or unsure on what we should do, or maybe something was forced upon us and we're finding ourselves kind of in a tailspin and not knowing, what the outcome or what lies ahead for us. Um, so one of the things to remember in those dark times and kind of what got me through my transition was that there's there's a plan out there meant for everyone, and it's just a matter of timing, and what happens is what's supposed to happen. And I truly believe that. When I found myself in transition, I was out of work for 13 months. And like I said
Mm.
earlier, I really wanted to hone myself in on, still doing what I loved. So in my head, I kind of created this vision board of where I wanted to work and who I wanted to work for and what I wanted to do. And every day I got up and I focused in on those priorities and those goals. And it took 13 months, but I landed in a role that was, I feel like, tailored to me. It's everything and more that I could have hoped for. And it was just a matter of time. But had you asked me in month one of being unemployed, I would have probably just cried and ran away.
Oh my goodness, that is so good, Jason. I love the vision board. And I think I heard Winston Churchill mention that one time. Darkest Before Dawn. Man, that is so good. I'm just so grateful that you shared that, because I know there's some people right now. It's probably dark. They're listening
Mhm.
right now. It's a dark time for them, and that just gave them. I feel like that probably gave them some hope that, hey, you know what? Maybe I need to go put a vision board up and get my mindset right and start focusing on the
Exactly.
things on the good. And so I'm so grateful for you sharing that. It's going to help a lot of people. Hey, we're going to, man, the time flies so fast. We're going to shift to it's time to accelerate. I'm just going to ask you a few fun
Sure.
questions as we, again, we're in season 3 here. You mentioned that you listen to the radio from time to time. And of course, you love your quiet time. But do you read books or listen to podcasts? If you do you have a preference?
You know what? I am an audiobook fan.
Ooh.
Um, yeah, and now I've gotten both of our children into it too. So every night at bedtime, we alternate nights. So I have one of the children every other night, and that's what we do at nighttime. We put on an audiobook on Audible, and that's what we listen to as we fall asleep. So I myself find that when I try to sit down and physically read a book, I get distracted.
Yeah.
The words start running together or my mind starts to wander. And for me, the audiobooks help me just relax and clear my mind and just listen to the words and absorb it better. So that's what personally works better for me.
I love that. We actually have a book club, and that I started back in January 2020. And after we got through a few books, I remember one of the members said, "Hey, whenever we pick a book, if it's not on Audible, I can't participate." So now it's a requirement. It has to be on Audible, because that's how some people, that's how they listen. And I love how you shared how you share that experience with your children. That is so good. I love that. Hey, let me ask you this. We just finished the holiday season. We're in, 2022. I always like to ask this question, because I feel like great leaders are grateful leaders. And I'm curious, what are you most grateful for?
I'm most grateful for, I'll just say the word opportunity. And whether that be new opportunities within my organization, I'm still grateful for the opportunity that I was given, 24 years ago to be a move coordinator. I'm
Hmm.
grateful for the opportunity I received 2 years ago to come work for this great organization. I'm just grateful for everyone in my life and everything that has happened to make me who I am today.
Yeah. Isn't that something, how you were in transition for 13 months, but yet you're so grateful for that time because it's allowed you to probably see some different perspectives, go through some different experiences. And now here you are in this incredible role, doing some incredible things with some incredible people. And I'm just so glad you shared that. Hey, let me ask you this. This is the final question on the show today, and as we're about to wrap up, and this is my favorite question of all. And here's the question: Jason, 10 years older, he's around the corner knocking at the door, and you need to go let him in. What's he going to tell you?
Oh, I know exactly what he's going to tell me. I am a worrier and I have anxiety a lot,
Mhm.
especially when it comes to making important decisions. Yeah, he's going to tell me not to worry as much. And I've done this all my life and I know, like I can look back now on my what my 39-year-old self and say the same thing. Don't worry as much. Don't sweat the small things. Yeah, worry is an unnecessary and time-consuming task that we all do that creates no value or no positivity. So to spend and waste time worrying, which is difficult not to do, just don't do it. Try not to do it as much because
Man,
things always work out.
that sounds like a very wise 10 years older Jason
Mhm.
Suto. That is so great. I appreciate you sharing that. Again, I know there's people listening that are going to get a lot out of some of the information you shared. You're definitely driving in the leadership lane. Hey, let me ask you, if someone wanted to connect with you, they heard something that you said, or want to connect with you in some way, how is the best way for them to connect?
I am fully open on LinkedIn, so
Hmm.
feel free to reach out to me with invitations and letting me know who you are and what you're up to. Yeah, I always welcome new connections and new friends. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me.
I love how you also share, be sure and put a note. I always recommend put a note on that LinkedIn invite, because many times we're not sure who's trying to connect with us and why they're trying to connect. But when you put that note, it just like adds that personal touch that says, hey, I heard you on Life in the Leadership Lane podcast. I really like this. I'd love to connect with you. And that is so good. And by the way, for all the listeners, anyone who's listening, if you enjoyed this podcast, be sure and put a rating on the podcast. Would love to hear your feedback. And I'm so grateful for you coming on the show today, for you sharing your wisdom and your perspective. And I had you on my list to get you on because I just know that you are so passionate about what you do. And you definitely, like I said, you definitely live life in the leadership lane. And so for that, I say thank you. And more importantly, I thank you for your friendship, Jason.
Bruce, this has been fantastic. I've looked up to you for many years. Your passion and your enthusiasm uh, is overwhelming to me, and it's something that I aspire to be. So I'm equally as thankful to be a guest for you, and so excited to have had this opportunity with you. I appreciate it.
Awesome. I cannot wait to share this, my friend. I'll talk to you later.
Okay, thanks, Bruce.